It is time for our third function when it comes to algebraic equations. When I'm looking at what I'm being asked to do, our objective is to be able to continue on this process of doing the opposite function, then doing it on the opposite side. Since these are going to start out as multiplication problems, then I have to understand that I'm doing the division property of equality. If I do my division on one side and I do the exact same division on the other side, then everything will be balanced and be equal according to the equation and variable. Please make sure that you have this handout. We're going to add to it. We're going to fill out a perfect example that we can look at when it comes to doing these type of problems. And then we're going to need it again for our next lesson. And hopefully you'll use it as you're doing your assignments. So as we get into this, once again, it's just being able to say, I can do these multiplication equations by using the division property of equality. So I know that if I start out with multiplication with a variable, then I'm simply going to do the opposite function, division, on the opposite side. Division property. Just like in the previous lessons, we're going to start with being able to write the equation from the information it's given. Just like I had warned, on our previous assignment, I caught some of you doing the first couple of questions and solving them, and I couldn't figure out what your equation was. It's not asking you to solve these, it's just simply asking you to be able to come up with the equation. So once again, I read it. Kasumi is saving an equal amount each week for 4 weeks to buy a video game for $55. Write a multiplication equation that can be used to determine the amount that she is saving each week. Now, once again, we're going to talk about cubing because it's really important, especially when I start getting into these type of questions, because there are some words like each that could mean multiplication or it could be division, depending on how it's related to the other words in the problem. So once again, we start with circling our numbers and labels. We underline what we're being asked to do. If we're asked to do two things, then we double underline it. We box in those clue math words that are telling us what math to do. We can eliminate stuff if we don't need it, and then we simply solve for what it's asking me to do. So when I look at this, I know each week, and the word each means one. I see 4 weeks, and then I also have $55. Well, what am I being asked to do with all of these numbers and labels? Write a multiplication equation to determine the amount that she is saving each week. All I'm asked to do is write a multiplication equation. So if I know it's multiplication, we're talking about equal amounts. Once again, the word equal can be multiply or divide. So I have to figure out what it's related to understand what math I'm doing. Well, it's related to each week. So if there's an equal amount each week for 4 weeks, then I know in this one that equal means multiplication. So I'm going to use the word for, and I look on my handout in my packet, and it tells me that is as well as for are going to be equal to. So I know that then when it says use a variable, and it tells me in the directions in the book, let A represent the amount saved each week, I'm simply going to use A as my variable. So A times 1, well, is it A times 1? It's not 8 times 1, right? So we know that it's A for 1 each week for 4 weeks. So I actually need A times the 4. And that's going to be equal to $55. So when I do A times 4, then once again, we want to remember to put our coefficient, our number connected to a variable, before the variable. So that's why in the book it shows 4A is equal to 55. Going to do the same process with this one regarding Vincent. Vincent and some friends shared the cost of a season ticket package for the local football team. The package costs $745 and each person contributed $186.25. Write a multiplication equation that can be used to find how many friends contributed to the ticket purchase. Right? So I know that the cost was $745. Once again, each person was contributing, so that's just one person, and we need to know that that amount is $186.25. Okay, so Then when I look at what I'm being asked to do is to write a multiplication equation, right? So we're going back to exactly what we had just done. And each, once again, we know we're multiplying. So if the cost was $745, cost tells me that that's what it's equal to. And therefore, when I start looking at what to do, then I have to figure out that there's a piece of information that I need to figure or find. And that's how many people there are. So I'm going to use a variable. Well, in this case, it tells me that I want to put an F for friends. So each person is just simply going to be an F. So if I had F number of friends who were contributing to the pot of $186.25 to get to the total pot cost of $745, then hopefully I know to put my number first, 186.25 times the F, right? Because that's what that floating dot means in your book. And that's going to equal the total of $745. All right, so you're going to try one on your own. Now, before you get started, though, I'm going to have you change something in your book. So if I do the math on this particular problem, then I'm going to have a number that I have to round in money, and I don't want to take all the extra time to go through all the steps of rounding again. So in your book, just change the amount to $58.84, and that'll make our life a lot easier. But right now, I just need you to come up with the math equation, read it, cube it, create your multiplication equation, come back and see how you did. All right, so hopefully you read it and you cubed it, right? You were reading a jewelry store selling a set of 4 pairs. So I have 4 pairs of earrings for $58.84. So a set is one, $58.84. And then it says Neva and 3 of her friends. So that gives me 4 people, right? They want to buy the set, so each could have 1 pair of earrings. Write a multiplication equation that could be used. Notice it doesn't tell you to solve for it. If I know it's 4, once again, 4 means that that's what it's equal to. And so I know I have 4 friends and they're paying some amount. Well, what amount are they paying? We don't know, right? That's what's being left open. But I know it's going to be equal to $58.84. So if I'm trying to figure out for each person, I just choose a variable, and I'm going to choose an M. Right? So did you come up with 4 times M or 4 times P for person or money, or it doesn't matter, once again, the variable. But did you come up with 4 times a variable is equal to 58.84? And if you did, fantastic. And if you didn't, and you don't see why, then please come and ask so I can help you before you move on. But when you're ready to move on, this is when you're going to get out your handout that we've worked on for the past 2 lessons, and we're going to add to it again today as well as tomorrow. So we're going to write this problem in the multiplication. All right, so on your handout that we started with a couple of lessons ago, we're filling it in each and every lesson so we have examples that we can look at as we go back through these. And we need to be able to use this as we move along until we own this process. Right? So under multiplication, lesson 6.4, write the math problem we just left off with. 4M is equal to $58.84. As we do the math, hopefully it'll make sense why I had you change it from 85 cents, because I really didn't want to have to review the steps of rounding necessarily in this lesson as well. So once we do it, then we're telling ourselves, what am I solving for? Solving for my variable. And what do I have to do? I have to do the opposite function and then do it on the opposite side. Well, what is a function? Functions are adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. And when we're talking about opposite functions, then we have to remember that adding goes with subtracting, subtracting goes with adding. And therefore, multiplying goes with division, and division goes with multiplication. All right? So if I'm getting my variable alone, right, that's my focus, then I'm asking, well, what am I doing to my variable? Don't say nothing, because I have a number touching it, right? We have to remember that a coefficient touching a variable, a number touching a variable, a number touching a parentheses means multiplication. That's the key idea in sixth grade math and moving forward in your life in mathematics. So if I know that I'm multiplying, then the opposite of that is going to be to divide. So I'm going to write it as a fraction. Well, why would I write it as a fraction? Because once again, another key idea of sixth grade and moving forward is that fractions are division. So if I show it the division this way, my life becomes so much easier than trying to do division boxes or division signs and adjusting the math problem. Write it as a fraction. That's what I expect to see because that's what I'm showing. And once I've done that, then I don't need to show 4 divided by 4. I'm just canceling it out. Yes, I expect to see on your paper that you're canceling it out. I need you to be able to do those steps because when we start doing 2 and 3 step algebraic equations, you've got to be able to show me step by step so that you can get to the right answer. Once I have that, then I have my variable alone. I have finished step 1. I bring down my variable, I bring down my equal sign. I don't need to see the arrows. I'm just showing you the arrows because you have to bring them down. If they're not with your final answer, you're missing a label. Therefore, you're missing points, and that's kind of silly. So I've done the opposite function. Now I have to do it on the opposite side. I divided by 4 on the left, so now I'm going to divide by 4 on the right. Whatever happens to the variable, to get rid of it and cancel it out, I have to do it on the opposite side. That's what the equality property tells me. So now, once again, quick review. Fractions are division. The top number is the numerator, the bottom number is the denominator, and the numerator, the top number, always goes inside the division box. It does not matter if it's a bigger number or a smaller number. It matters that it is the top number. Always goes inside the division box. It gets divided by the denominator to give us our quotient, our answer. So I'm going to write out my math problem. 58.84 divided by 4. All right, so reviewing quickly, because these are in your packets, can I divide by or a decimal by a whole number? Yes. What do I have to do? I raise my decimal. Now, once again, if you need to, you can get your handy dandy calculator and go step by step and type in the number inside the box divided by the divisor, the outside number. You type in 5 divided by 4 equals, and you're going to see 1 and stuff. You get rid of the stuff, you just keep the 1 because 1 times 4 is 4. Gives you a remainder of 1. You bring down your 8. If you need to, type in 18 divided by 4, you're going to see 4 and stuff. 4 times 4 is 16. So you're only going to keep the 4, and that'll give you a 16 with a remainder of 2. I bring down my next number, which is an 8. 4 goes into 28 how many times? 7 equal times, because that's 28. And therefore, I bring down my 4, and 4 goes into 4 one time. So I end up with $14.71. I end up with M is equal to $14.71. This should now be written on your handout, and we should be able to reference this every time we're doing a math problem. Moving on. So once again, we're doing the opposite function, step 1, then we're doing it on the opposite side. I have 2x is equal to 10. Well, don't focus on, I don't know. Focus on just simply doing the math, and you will be successful. Once again, this is called the division property of equality, simply because I have to do the opposite function of multiplication with the variable, which is division, then I do it on the opposite side. So if I know that 2x is 2 times x, and I have to get my x alone, then I ask, what am I doing to the x? I'm multiplying. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I make it into a fraction, and then I cancel it out. Yes, I expect you to make it into a fraction, and then cancel it out. I bring down my variable, my equal sign, because I have gotten my variable alone, and that's my goal. Now I move to step 2. I divided by 2 with the variable, so I'm going to divide by 2 on the opposite side. 5 divided by 2. If you need to do a division problem, feel free to do it. If you don't, and you just know that that's 5, great. So x is equal to 5. That's your answer. It should be pretty simple. But then some of you get to questions like the next one, and you're like, I don't remember what to do. All right, so when we get into fractions, I've got some important things that we really need to cover and make sure we take notes on. But once again, it's just multiplication with a variable, one-step algebraic equation. We're okay as long as we can do the opposite function, then on the opposite side. So I'm still going to start the exact same way. I'm going to find my variable and ask what I'm doing to my variable so I can get it alone. Well, I have a coefficient touching my variable, so I know that's multiplication. How do I get rid of it? I'm going to divide. Now notice I'm not showing any kind of steps of KFC or anything else. All I'm saying is, in order to get this alone, I have to divide by 2/3, so I'm going to cancel it out. Yes, I expect you to show that you're dividing by the fraction of 2/3 and canceling it out. That gets your variable alone. You keep it. Once again, I don't need to see the arrows, but I do need to see you keeping the m is equal to. Now, this is the important part that we really need to focus on, because when I go to the opposite side, if I don't set it up correctly, we're not going to be able to get to the right answer. It is so important that you write this down, you put this into your mind, and you remember it. That way, your math is always going to get you to the right answer instead of some issues that we run into. This is so important, guys. Please pay attention to it. My step 2, doing it on the opposite side. It must go behind whatever is there. This setup, well, this is pretty easy to understand. I know I'm just going to go behind the 5/8 and I'm going to divide by 2/3. Not a problem. The problem happens, and I would suggest that you write this down in your notes also, is when it is flipped, right? When we have the answer over on the left-hand side and the 2/3 and the variable over on the right-hand side. The steps are still the same. I'm still going to divide by 2/3 because I'm multiplying by 2/3. I'm still going to cancel it out. Then when I go to the opposite side, I have to stop myself. Instead of just throwing it out in front, I have to say, well, wait a minute. I have to put it behind whatever is there. That means my first step is to slide the 5/8 over. Then I can put divided by 2/3. If I don't do that, guys, you're going to end up with the reciprocal of the answer, which is not the right answer. So we have to make sure that we put our math behind whatever is there in my step 2. Once I have that, then we can continue with our math. But some of you are like, I don't remember how to divide. Well, that's okay. Pause, think, engage your brain, look around the room, use your tools, go to any of your references, go to Canvas, look in your book, whatever you need to. But this was in lesson 1, and it's still on Canvas, and it's still on my walls in the classroom. We have to KFC. I cannot divide fractions. It is impossible, but I can change it into a math problem that I can solve. How do I KFC? Once again, I keep my first one. I'm going to flip my second one. That's once again called a reciprocal. So I put 3/2 and I change division to multiplication. Then I ask myself, well, how do I multiply fractions? Well, I simply multiply across. So I'm going to take 8 times 2. 8 times 2 gives me 16. 5 times 3 gives me 15. Therefore, we know that it's 15/16. So m is equal to 15/16 is the final answer. All right, following those exact same steps, I want you to solve this one, see what you get, come back and check. So hopefully you really did follow along, and if you didn't get it the first time because maybe you lost your focus, you went back and rewatched the last problem, this is set up the exact same way. I have 4/5 times k is equal to 1/3. What am I doing to my variable? Well, I'm multiplying. I have to get my variable alone, so I have to do the opposite function because that is step 1. The opposite function of multiplication is dividing by 4/5. Hopefully, you showed that you're dividing by 4/5 and then you canceled it out because that's what I expect to see on your work. Once it's canceled out, then I know I'm going to keep my k is equal to because that's my variable and it is alone. Then you went to the opposite side. And once again, in step 2, we have to put the math behind whatever is already there. Not a problem. since it's on the right-hand side. So I'm just simply going to have 1/3 divided by the 4/5. When I have 1/3 divided by the 4/5, then hopefully you went through your KFC. You kept your first one, you flipped your second one, you got 5/4. You changed your division to multiplication, and then you said, oh, I just multiply across. So 3 times 4 is what? 3 times 4 is 12. And then 1 times 5 is 5. I end up with an answer of 5/12. Is that what you got? If you got it, great, fantastic. We're good to go to the next problem. If you didn't get it and you don't know why, please come and ask. Let me help you find your mistake in your math. So we're going to walk through this one together. And once again, if we would just take the time and cube our questions, then we wouldn't get so confused on what it is we're being asked to do. Because many times when you're doing word problems, a high people come and say, I don't know how to do this one. And I'm like, okay, let me see your paper. And you haven't marked anything up. So yeah, if you're not marking it up, it does get confusing. Just simply mark it up and you'll be all right. So we're going to cube. We're going to look at our important numbers and labels. And sometimes our numbers and labels that we circle are not important, right? I have 2 different bags, right? So that's a number and a label. And then we're talking about what? Milligrams of sodium. That's a label. And then let's see. Okay, so I actually have measurements, right? I have 9 servings and 7 servings. That's my 2 different bags. Okay, so I understand that I have a bag. I'm going to break it up into groups of 9 and groups of 7 depending on the name. So my question is, which brand has more milligrams of sodium per serving? So I underline it. But notice there's a second question. So we double underline it. And that way, when I'm marking it up and I think, okay, I've answered my question, I can go back. And if I see I have an underlined portion and a double underlined portion, I should have 2 answers. And if I don't, I haven't done all my work. So when I'm doing that, then I'm looking for these key words, and our key words in this particular problem is per serving. So per serving, that sounds familiar. Well, hopefully you can remember, oh, that's talking about unit rates, isn't it? That goes all the way back to our very first unit, which was lesson 1.7. That's in our first book. So we have all of those tools and those references to go back to and look at. But if I know it's per serving, then I know I have a denominator of 1. So I'm going to have to divide each of these math problems. So how is that set up then? And how do I find how much more? That's subtraction. So when I'm thinking about how these are set up and how it's related to our lesson, then I also need to look at the extra information. So I have calories, sodium, and sugar. And in our cubes, the E, we don't use that very often, but it is important, especially with these word problems, is that they're going to try to confuse you. So why do I have calories there? To confuse me. Why do I have sugar there? To confuse me. So I just get rid of them. I ignore it. I don't care. What I do care about is the sodium, and I know for the northern grown sodium, so I'm going to use my variable N to stand for northern, that I have 9 servings, so 9 groupings in the N, and that's equal to 1,530, so 1530. So if I set up my original math problem as 9N equals 1530, then I can do that math, right? What about Heartland? Well, let's use the variable of H for Heartland. And we know it has 7 servings. So 7 times however many there are milligrams for Heartland is going to be equal to 1,211. So 1211. Well, so now I just go through my lesson. How am I going to get my variable alone? I'm going to do my opposite function on the opposite side. What am I doing to the n? I'm multiplying by 9. So to get rid of it, what do? I divide by 9. And I cancel it out. And that tells me, therefore, I have to go to the opposite side for step 2 and divide by 9. How do I set that up? Well, once again, my top number goes inside my division box. My bottom number is my divisor. It goes on the outside. And then I divide. I can type in my handy dandy calculator if I need to. I know 9 won't go into 1, but it will go into 15. 15 divided by 9 gives me 1 point stuff. I ignore the stuff. I just need to know it goes in 1 time. I put that above the 5 because I know 1 times 9 is 9, and that's going to give me a remainder. What's my remainder? My remainder is 6. So 15 minus 9 is equal to 6. I bring down my next number, which is a 3. And so 63 divided by 9, well, that's an even number, right? It goes in 7 times. And therefore, I have a 0 remainder when I do 7 times 9 is equal to 63, and I subtract it. But I still have that 0. So if I bring down a number, right, if I bring down that 0, I have to remember to bring something up. So therefore, I have to just simply put a 0 up because 9 will go into 0 times. So what we're seeing is that we have 170 milligrams per serving for Northern Grown. Okay, what about Heartland? So I have 7H equals 1,211. I have my 7H coefficient variable. It's multiplication. My opposite function is division. So I'm going to divide by 7. When I divide by 7, that just cancels it out and gets my variable alone. So I know I now do my opposite side. I'm going to divide by 7. Top number goes inside my division box, dividing by 7. So 1,211 divided by 7. 7 goes into 12 once, which is 7. I have a remainder. 7 minus 12 is going to be 5. I bring down my 1. 7 goes into 51 7 times, because 7 times 7 is 49. And then 51 minus 49 gives me a remainder of 2. I bring down my 1. 7 goes into 21. How many times? 3 times. So my first question then is, which brand has more milligrams of sodium per serving? Oh, well, 173 is greater, right? So Heartland has more. That's my first answer. But as I'm looking, I see that I have a double underline. I have a second part. So it's how much more? Well, now I'm going to subtract. So I have 173 minus 170. Easy enough. That's just 3. So I know my second answer is 3 milligrams. Or you can put 3 milligrams more. All right, so this is our third lesson of one-step algebraic equations. It's the same steps every single time. Focusing on getting my variable alone, I'm going to do the opposite function, then I'm going to do it on the opposite side. So as you're going through these, look at this handout, use it, and if you have questions after you've taken your notes, come and ask.